Hey there. So, in this lesson, we'll be talking about RESP and RRSP. So, what is RESP? Well, they're both long-term savings plans, but one is geared towards your education for a child or just for a child, and the other one, that's this one here, the RSP is towards education, and the other one is geared towards your retirement, being able to retire. So, let's talk about each one. But before we do that, I want to make notes how these plans and system works. So anything in finance, well, finance is a lot like tennis. If you know what you're doing and you're good at what you do, you can make a lot of money. But if you don't know what you're doing and you try to invest, you can actually lose a lot of money because in tennis, you can score points by shooting the ball in a well-mannered and onto your opponent's court, or you can lose points by waiting for your opponent to make a mistake. And so in financial systems, if you make mistakes, then you can actually lose money. So if you do want to invest, typically investing is a good idea in terms of these. It's like it's typically foolproof, but if you don't know the rules, you can actually lose money. And it's a lot like hacking in general, if you know the rules. Like hacking by definition, it means using an existing system and making it do stuff that was not intended to do. So I assume these plans were meant to help regular people, but also to help the very rich and wealthy people because they're able to find small loopholes to take advantage of these rules. And I may talk about some of this a little later on. But let's get to it and let's talk about um, what they are and how it can be used. So this is an education savings plan, RESP. It allows you to put money aside for your children's post-secondary education. And it doesn't have to be your child. It could be someone else's child. It could be a friend or relative. So it can be anybody's child, and it allows you to save money for your grandchildren or other relatives. And more importantly, other people can invest into it as well. So that doesn't necessarily have to be you. But if you open the plan, well, we'll talk about some of the downsides because there is a big downside to this. So what's let me just hit the highlighter. What's one of the biggest benefits? Well, it grows tax free. So, once you put the money in an account, and it typically has some sort of savings or some interest, it will grow tax free. So you won't be taxed on any extra money you make on it from by the interest rates. So it's tax free. You may be eligible for other grants. So if you invest into your RESP, because the government wants to incentivize you to put money with them, because let's face it, financial institutions and the government, they want you to save money because they play with your money to make more money, because money always makes more money. So they want you to put money into it, and as an incentive, you may be eligible for other grants and benefits. So if you have an RSP, they actually may put more money into it based on whatever you apply for. So you actually may get more money. So that's good, but there's also a downside, which we'll talk about later. So your savings will also be supplemented by the Canadian government and other provincial governments, which means you receive extra money anywhere between 20 to 40% of your annual income. So whatever you're making in your job, they may put extra money anywhere between 20 to 40%. So that's pretty lot. The money from the closing RSP can be given as a gift to an educational institution. Um, I probably wouldn't, depending if I like the educational student or if I owned an educational institute or my friend owned an educational institution, I can give the money there as a gift. And typically, when it's a gift, anything you give as a gift is typically tax free. So you can collect money from the government based on whatever extra benefits they give you. So they give you extra benefits, and when you close it, you can give all that money plus all the extra you receive from the government to an educational institution. But it's probably a better idea if you or your friends or somebody owns educational so it goes directly to them, or to their business, unless you really like the educational institution, like maybe the University of Toronto. You really appreciate all their work, so maybe you want to give to them as a gift. It's really up to you. Okay, so here are the limits. Each RSP must have a designated beneficiary. It has to go towards someone. So if it's so you have to put someone's name on it. And that's basically that's the beneficiary. They're the ones that are supposed to receive it. So you cannot receive it. It goes towards a specific person. And it could be anybody. It could be your child, it could be your grandchild, it could be a child of a relative or friend. So basically it just has to be a child. You may only use the money for educational purpose. See, that's another limitation. It has to be an educational related expense, and you must show proof, a receipt. So maybe a laptop, maybe some rooming, maybe like you want to get a dorm or food, but it has to be educational related. But if you think about it, let's say your child or your friend's child buys two laptops, and may argue, hey, one laptop is to help me do this work, and one laptop is to help me do that work. Well, so that's what they may argue, but in reality, maybe you took one took one of the laptops, or you gave one of the laptops to your friends. So that's sort of a bit of a loophole in terms of the educational related expenses, and because as long as it looks like it's for the child itself, then it doesn't matter how much money you like pull out for it. The beneficiary or the child must be enrolled into a school, has to be going to school, either in Canada or abroad. And the program must meet the minimum weeks of study. So they have to be actually attending school certain hours per week. If they find out your kid is not attending school, then you'll probably lose your benefits, and they'll probably take the money back. There's also a withdrawal limit, so you can't just take all the money out. You can only take out a certain amount of money based on your situation. So if you're a full timer, you're most likely to pull out more money. If you're a part time student, you probably can pull out less, or maybe the other way around. If you're full time, but basically, basing on your status, whether you're full time or part time, the money you be able to withdraw may differ. Another limitation is that the RESP can only stay open for 30 to 40 years. So that's sort of a limitation there. You can't have it open indefinitely. And but you can transfer it to another child, I suppose, into for another investment. So that's one thing you can do. Lifetime RRSP contributes a limit of $50,000 per beneficiary. So your beneficiary can only receive up to $50,000. You can't exceed 50,000, so you can only contribute up to $50,000. After then, there's no point in contributing more because it won't let you. So you can only put $50,000. The money paid out of the RSP is taxed at the hand of the students. So basically, once you pull that money out, it will be taxed, but it's taxed at the hand of a student, not the person who put the money in. Because students they typically have no jobs, that means they're at a lower tax income a bracket. So they will be taxed less as if they were like working. If they were working and making a lot of money, they probably get taxed more. But most students are not working, so when they pull the money out, this RP will be taxed less. So it's sort of like well, you'll see the next one, the next the RRSPs. If it's not used for education, it will be taxed at your regular income plus an additional 20%. So that's a penalty. If they find out that you're pulling the money out for something other than the education, they will tax you at your regular income, whatever your regular income is, plus an additional 20. So that's if you get caught. Be using it for something else other than education. Now, closing your RSP will result in all your funds returning to its contributor. So let's say your mom contributes to it and your dad contributes it, and the government obviously gives you subsidies and they contribute to it. When you close your RSP or RESP, the money returns back to all the remaining. So your mom gets back their money, your dad gets back their money, and the government takes back their money. Now, another big downside is that if the subscriber dies, so if you open the RESP and you die before the funds are used, it may not necessarily benefit the beneficiary. There might actually be a penalty. So it's a good idea to use the funds, like whoever opens it, it's a good idea to use the funds before you pass away or before you die so that the person may not incur any penalty. So that's a RESP. And again, if you know how the system works and you know like sort of the loopholes, and I told you just one about the educational student in terms of using your money for school expenses, you can sort of like use that to your benefits. Not that I'm advocating fraud, but it's you can see some of the loopholes in the system based on that. Okay, so the second thing we'll be talking about is the registered retirement savings plan. This is very popular. You probably heard this. People talk about this a lot, and the reason why this is so popular is because you basically can lower your taxes. So, well, let's read the points here. Retirement saving plans that you establish can be used to reduce your taxes. So, whatever you're making, let's say you're making $50,000 per year, and if you contribute to RRSP, let's say you say you contribute $1,000 to it. Let's say you're making 50,000. So basically, you would basically it would look like you're making only $49,000 because $1,000 is contributed to your RSP. This can put you in a lower tax bracket, and you'll see just in a couple seconds about that. You or your spouse can contribute to your RSP. So let's say your spouse is not making any money. So you can contribute to your spouse's RSP, and then when she pulls the money out, because she's not making any money, that means that she won't be taxed. She'll be taxed at a lower rate. So if you have a high income, if you have a high income and you put the money into your spouse's RSP and she doesn't have a job, then when she pulls out the money, it will be taxed at a lower rate. So that's another sort of loophole that you can do. But you probably have to get married for that. Or when you retire and your spouse is retired, then you sort of split the difference. You generally must pay taxes when you withdraw the money. So if you put money into your RRSP, and let's say you're making $50,000, and if you withdraw it while you're making $50,000 per year in your job, then there's no benefit. There is really no benefit. There actually might be a penalty. So it's only best to take out the RRSP when you have no income, when you're retired, or this sort of loophole here, which I mentioned. You guys are lucky. I'm giving you guys loopholes in this lesson as well. Okay, so the benefits, contributions reduce your perceived income, and I use the word perceived because basically what it looks like you're making, which may put you in a lower tax bracket. So this is the Canadian. I thought I would include this. This is the Canadian federal tax bracket and the Ontario provincial tax bracket. So yes, you get taxed twice. You get taxed on the federal level and you get taxed on the provincial level. Because we're in Ontario, I thought we used the Ontario provincial tax bracket. So if you're making, let's say you're making, let's say you're making 55, less than 55 or less, right? If you put money in to your account while you're making this, there's really no benefit. And really, there is not much, very little benefit because you're already at this tax bracket. But let's say you're here. Let's say your job is making this much money, right? And then you start contributing to your RRSP. Well, this was what originally what you're making, what it looks like you're making. But if you contribute to your RRSP, it may lower you into this tax bracket. So you're subtracting the RRSP on your income, and if you fall less than this, then you're only paying 15% taxes opposed to 20% taxes. So your RRSP benefits the rich, pretty much. If you're making if you're making over $200,000, you're getting taxed 33%, which is pretty big. But if you contribute to your RRSP, then you may fall into this tax bracket here. And then when you're in this tax bracket, you only pay this much tax, 29%, which is great. So that's the same thing with Ontario. If you're making this much tax, if you're making this much money, and you contribute to RRSP, right? You actually may fall into the previous tax bracket. So you have to sort of know how much you're making and whether or not your contributions will lower your income to look like this, to look underneath, to be this. So it just lowers your perceived income. So let's say you're pulling in $5,000 and you contribute $1,000 to your RRSP, then to the government it looks like you're making only $4,000 opposed to $5,000, which could possibly put you in a lower tax bracket. You do not pay taxes on your RRSP Well, until you withdraw the money. So until you pull out the money, that's when you get taxed on it. And that's the trick. The trick is to pull out your money only when you have no job or when you're not making any money. So that's the catch. Because you get taxed less. So any period when your income is low, you can withdraw your RSP and be taxed at a lower rate, as you can see from these tax brackets. You could contribute to your spousal's RRSPs, which can reduce your combined tax burden. So, so if you contribute, so I think it allows you extra contribution. So if you contribute to hers, then not only can you contribute more, it would they you both would benefit when you retire because you both be at a lower tax bracket, so you can save more money. You can also borrow your RSP to buy your first home or your education. So you can actually use for other things other than retirement. You can use your RSSP tax free to buy your first home or pay your education. However, the downside is that you got to pay that back within a certain amount of time. So that's a bit of a downside there. You may have the opportunity to use your RSPs to invest in other investment plans because ideally at the end of the day the banks want to make money, and if you have money in your RSP they'll find any means to want you to invest in their products. So they may try to convince you to use your RSSP to invest in other investment plans. I can't really comment on that because I'm not investing type. I'm not the gambling type, so I wouldn't, in my personal opinion, if you're not a gambler, then you probably shouldn't do that. But if you're a gambler and you know that something's going to go up, then you may have this option. You have to talk to your bank about it. Okay, so what are the limits? The limits is that you can only contribute 18% of your income, so whatever you had, your 18% of your income to your previous year or the maximum amount. So every bank is different. Some banks they allow you a maximum amount of $5,000 per year, and that accumulates. So every year that goes by, you can accumulate more. However, if you do not have the money, if you do not contribute, that $5,000 maximum limit gets carried forward to the next year. So maybe next year you can contribute $10,000 and so on and so forth. These are all incentives for you to contribute to your RRSP because they really want you to put your money there. Because at the end of the day, again, these financial institutions and the government they want to use your money to make more money. So it's in their best interest for you to invest. And another limit, you may have to pay a fee for certain situations, such as opening an account and maintaining an account. So you got to talk to each bank is different. Some banks they want you to pay maybe a $10 fee every month or a $10 fee every year just for them to manage your account, which really honestly doesn't make sense because everything is done like electronically. It's just another money grab. So if you know what you're doing, let's say you never used it and you don't know what you're doing, then you're paying a fee for nothing. So let's say you're making $40,000 and you're paying a fee, but you took your money out while your income is $40,000. There is no benefit. You actually lose money because you're paying a fee. So the best time to pull out your RRSP is when you have no money, when you have very little money. If you have very little money, then you fall into a lower tax bracket. You fall into the lowest tax bracket, and that money is basically taxed based on this, based on the lower tax bracket, whichever you fall in. So I think that's as best as I can explain it, and that's about it. Okay, and I don't think there's any homework for this lesson either. Okay.